Welcome back into another episode of the XRP podcast. Today, I'm going to be diving into several tokens of what you might invest in as the Fed starts to cut. We're going to see and talk about that along with a guest. Of course, you guys will know Mr. Evan Aldo that will be joining us here in a minute. I do want to thank our sponsor today. And of course, you guys know who that is. That is Uphold. If you are not involved with Uphold right now, I want you to take a little bit of time, jump over to uphold.com, use our link down there. This is going to get you access, one, to a new exchange that, of course, does a lot of cool things in terms of getting you on your way in crypto. In terms of great assets to jump into, whether you're an enterprise or an individual, doesn't really matter. You guys can set up an account over there, but they have the new debit card, which is the Uphold debit card. This is a card with the most XRP rewards out there, 6% on everything you buy in the first 3 months of your card. Plus, you can, of course, gain all the benefits of adding and stacking other rewards on top of that, including a direct deposit reward. So check that out. No credit checks required. This will go directly out of your account balance that you have full control over. And of course, it's used anywhere Visa is. This is the one to do if you're going to use a debit card and not hit your credit, not have those kind of things bother you. This is the way to go. We, of course, love Uphold. It is one of our premium partners here on the channel. So check it out and get started over there. All right, so a couple of things have been happening. I'm going to bring in Mr. Evan Aldo, as you guys know. How are you, Evan?
Doing fantastic, man. Great to be on. Always great to talk to you, Paul.
Yeah, it's good. We're going to be covering all the charts today. We'll talk about ETH, XRP, Solana, mainly what are some of the angles, but there is a lot of XRP news that we'll get to. Before we do that, I want to just make sure that you guys are over there following Evan on his YouTube channel. I'll bring that up for you. This, of course, is the YouTube channel Evan Aldo. If you guys haven't already subscribed to it, whoa, 22.5, man, you are rocking it there, bro. The key is Evan does a really good breakdown on setups, how to trade using a variety of tools. Are you still using Market Cypher primarily?
Yeah, primarily Market Cypher and then traditional TA mainly.
Yeah, so he's got a great course on that. If you are a trader, this is the guy to follow. So check out Evan Aldo over there. All right, so let's talk about a couple of things here, Evan. One, of course, is the fact that we have just had the Fed meeting, and it looks as though we are in. We have another quarter basis point cut in place. When you think about where this goes from here, and I want to talk about the QT and QE timing. Quantitative tightening has ended. That happened on December the 1st. QE, the window, is the real question mark. And I guess if you look at where the Fed is right now, I'll just take a look at what their dates are. Next meeting calendar right now, FOMC, January 28th and 29th will be our next FOMC meeting. And the thing about this, when you look at where Chair Powell is and whether it's a hawkish move, if you consider it a hawkish move after the cut yesterday, when you look at this, we won't have an early January. So it's likely that we will see a lot of the earnings coming in from stock market. And we may even get some employment data back in. But do you feel like some that are out there saying that this might actually be one of many cuts coming up? What are your thoughts?
So I like to follow the betting odds and the numbers. And I think, as long as you have Powell in, as long as you don't see the S&P 500 cratering, as long as you don't see the NASDAQ cratering, it's probably going to be a pause in January. And if you look at the odds too, as well, farther out, I believe you don't really see another cut until May or June.
Whoa.
That's when the new Fed, go ahead.
Wow.
Yeah.
May or June?
Well, that's what you were looking at. And I mean, it makes sense. The trend has been very conservative, very slowly. That's how Powell's been, more hawkish, more slow. And if you look at what happened towards the end of 2024, you saw some rate cuts. Things were generally bullish. I mean, crypto hasn't done as well as we would have hoped, but traditional markets were bullish, similar to the end of 2024. Once you saw that pause in January, things did cool off a bit. Now, I don't think it's going to be as catastrophic as your Trump tariff fear, but I do think that you may see, as long as you see pauses, you may see things gradually come down. I know there's people talking about interest rates going down to 2%, all this, kind of, crazy stuff, I would say, volatile stuff. I think it's going to be more of a slow bleed down unless asset prices really drop down a lot for TradFi. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're probably just going to see maybe a 10% drop for the S&P 500, maybe 15% for the NASDAQ. On the bright side, I do think Bitcoin and I do think a lot of these alts, the good ones that'll survive, in 5 years from now, probably won't drop down that bad. And, what we'll talk about in a second is, fortunately, I do think a lot of things like Ethereum, hopefully XRP, hopefully a few other alts, Solana too, can outperform Bitcoin on the
That's the
potential
question. Yeah.
way down for the next 4 to 6 months. And I mean, I think the important thing to realize is any alt that can outperform Bitcoin for the next 4 to 6 months, just like when they ended QT in 2019, you went into a bear market for a few months, but Ethereum outperformed Bitcoin. I think even Cardano outperformed Bitcoin. Altcoins that are still relevant today, a lot of them outperformed Bitcoin during that time. So anything that can outperform Bitcoin during that time is something that probably will do extremely well into the end of this decade.
Well, and there's a lot of catalysts that you kind of have to think about here that intersect with crypto liquidity, real yields. If you look at 2026 as an easing cycle, plus the move towards QA, this of course would increase system liquidity, and this is going to compress real yields. Historically, that's been an environment where Bitcoin and other high beta crypto, which is what we're talking about, become liquidity sponges. I mean, everybody's moving into risk. Do you feel like that would be the case this time?
I think that yes, and especially it's kind of the regulation is what may mark a bottom here, what may mark the next start of the
Right.
next bull run. Clarity Act. When does that get passed? My guess would be quarter 3, maybe quarter 2 at the earliest, sometime between May and October, which is where I would think is the main potential bottom for Bitcoin. And I don't think it's going to be that catastrophic. I mean, somewhere between 50 to 70K. If things get really wild, really fearful, maybe down to 40K, but I don't think that's going to be a long-standing thing. And keep in mind, Ethereum bottomed out before Bitcoin in
Yeah.
2022, in June of 2022. So, maybe it bottoms out a month earlier in May of 22,
Yeah.
in May of 26. Maybe Bitcoin takes a little bit longer to bottom out, maybe until October. We'll see what happens.
Well, I think the point is that we've got Hassett coming in May.
Mhm.
You have the January meeting, the March meeting, and then May 6, 7. So I guess the question is he in by the 6th or the 7th? Is that the last meeting for Powell? I got to look and see
I
what that is.
believe it's May 15th. Powell's term ends, I
Term.
believe. Could be wrong, but I believe it's May 15th. So
Well,
we got
the fact
Powell.
that you'd have a 6th and 7th meeting, because you won't have one. Well, right after that, you go to June, I think
Yeah.
it's June 17, 18, and then you go into July. So that's where the cycle could really start to heat up,
Mhm.
especially around accelerated rate cuts. I'm still curious as to maybe the Fed gets forced a little bit by what's happening in Japan if we, in fact, do continue to see rate hikes in the Bank of Japan, which is going to
Mhm.
really create, I think, a lot of almost margin calls in reality, because you're going to have
Uh,
reverse carry trade that's actually now not it's not active anymore. So huge issue there.
yeah.
Okay, so a couple of points that I want to hit on here, because ETH is part of this narrative versus Bitcoin. And some attacks have been kind of running. Okay, I won't say at the ETH ecosystem, but definitely at the underlying blockchain efforts that happen in stablecoins. The IMF now is warning, and I'll bring up a screen share for you guys so you can kind of see this story. But the IMF right now has said, we think stablecoins may undermine emerging market currencies. This basically is simply saying that the IMF says this is going to basically cause a bank run, is what they're saying. When you look at that and you think about the success of where stablecoins are in general. So what you see here with this is the IMF released the report saying stablecoins would pose a big risk in emerging markets, developing economies, all that. And it really boiled down to two things. One is the amount of activity that's moving into stablecoins. We've already seen this growth over on the RWA charts. When you look at that, and ETH being one of the central staples of stablecoins, First of all, is this the long play for Ethereum that Tom Lee is really betting on when you look at the charts?
Probably, man. That's what I think. That's what I think. And I'll show you why. Let's look at the screen. Let's look at the charts right here. We're going to go, let me share my chart. Now let's look at ETH versus Bitcoin. And now
Yep.
this is probably one of the most important charts to look at right now on the macro. This line right here is the last time the Fed ended QT. And during this area, a lot of people would, if you just look at this chart, you would think we would have been in a bull market. Ethereum outperformed
Yes.
Bitcoin, but
Yep.
no, we went through pandemic. We went through all sorts of problems here
Yep.
where things came down, crashed excrementally, and ETH still somehow outperformed Bitcoin with, a little bit of corrections here and there, but you still outperformed Bitcoin for a long time. Now, we just ended QT right now, and ETH has been on a nice tear against Bitcoin. And it looks like, you look at market stuff for B here, money flow. For people not familiar, the main thing to look here on the higher time frame is money flow curving upward, similar to this area. And you saw this big rally right here the last time we were at this area. So if we can do this, and again, and I hope we can, you maybe have a huge rally for ETH versus Bitcoin into 2027, into 2028, if all goes as planned. So I do think there's a good shot for that. Now, we want to, be a little bit cautious now. If over the next 4 to 6 months, if this situation happens, I would be a little bit more pessimistic, a little bit worried, because we don't want this to happen. We want a situation like this to happen. We want ETH to show strength against Bitcoin. Like I mentioned, we want altcoins to show strength against Bitcoin for the next 4 to 6 months, especially if we're in a bear market. So that would equate to, something very strong. That would equate to something very strong there.
Well, and I think the point you're getting at, first of all, I talked to Lynn Alden. I've talked to a couple other analysts that have been tracking this, and they're all saying the same thing, and that is that the 4-year cycle's over. So what you're saying is another high in 2026, possibly early 27. Would that negate it?
Well, now here we go. Now this is
here we go.
Yeah. So when you look at ETH versus Bitcoin, ETH, you don't have to make new all-time highs for ETH to outperform Bitcoin, just like what happened in 2019. You would have thought, you look at that chart, you would have thought we were in a great bear market all through COVID. No, not at all. So I would think, 4-year cycle, it depends how you define a 4-year cycle. I mean, it's different.
Where would you enter on Ethereum right now? Do you feel we are in a short, kind of fake pump right now as, ETH starting to move to almost 3,400? Do you think we'll see a sub 3K again, or possibly down to as low as 27?
I think that eventually, let's look at our ETH chart. And I do think that, never underestimate the bear market rallies. Never underestimate the bear market rallies here. If you look at ETH itself, I do think the big line in the sand is around 3,700, 3,500, right around here.
Okay.
If you can break, now my base case is more bearish. I think something like this will happen. It could take longer because we're in a more lower volume time. But if you can break above, 4,000, 3,700, do this, then you could break the 4-year cycle and make new all-time highs in 2026. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be more a situation like this, and then you're going to come down. And what would be really big here is holding. I don't even think you may be able to hold 2,000. Like you definitely, if you can outperform Bitcoin on the way down, let's say that ETH comes down to like 2,000, that's about a 60% correction. If Bitcoin does a little bit worse, 65% correction, so it equates to like Bitcoin at 45K, this at 2K. So as long as you can make a higher low here, some point, before October, I would say, some situation like this, maybe May, maybe a little bit later, then this is like a huge point. 2,000, I think, is a really, really good deal for Ethereum. And I mean, in the long scheme of things, I mean, for somebody who doesn't have any position or somebody who's just trying to get in, I mean, I think DCAing for the next, 6 to 12 months probably will do very well. I mean, it rarely makes sense to put a lump sum in, especially right now. It'd be very risky to just put a lump sum in it.
Yeah, I think the key here is looking for those potentials. Now, many people would just say, hey, it's just a dollar cost average if you're pro ETH. I know we'll talk about XRP next, but a lot of our viewers and listeners are doing that. They sprinkle in a little bit just dollar cost across the year. And overall, that a lot of times is a great position. Now, if you're trading, then you're looking for longs and shorts, possibly using some leverage or not. I
Mhm.
don't necessarily use leverage, but I definitely do long and shorts now. Um, and it's pretty interesting because the potential here for Ethereum is so much better at this critical point than what possibly will be the Bitcoin play. And I'll talk about Bitcoin in a second, but I want to jump over to XRP. First thing I want to show you guys, and I'll share this story with you. This is a pretty big deal because it does start to put a lot of focus on supply. So XRP now supply vanishing 45% drop in 60 days. Many people are saying, hey, this is a big deal because that's a billion tokens leaving trading platforms. Now you could say, well, all right, there's a couple of reasons why, but Glassnode says these are the kind of exchange balances that are dropping right now. So either people are locking in for the bear market, when you look at this, or you're starting to see a lot of things around these holders that are moving them in just into cold storage and saying, hey, this is where we're going to stay for a while. And we're just going to reduce the available supply. The other thing is the ETFs are, of course, causing a big deal. They just cracked a billion. Likelihood is this is probably could see as much as 20 billion in the next 6 months is what a lot of analysts
Mm.
now are pointing to. With that being the case, and where XRP is trading now, what do you think XRP has to hold for short term, especially if you were trading against Bitcoin?
So I think that news definitely strengthens the case for XRP outperforming Bitcoin for the next 4 to 6 months, which is good. I do think that when you look at, let's just look at the XRP chart right now, the normal
Hmm.
chart. Now, you've been very range bound here. You kind of just been in this range. A lot of us
Yep.
were hoping that you'd break up to $6. I think you eventually will break up, within a few years, hopefully, maybe sooner. We'll see. But I think that if you can, I think the big thing is you're eventually going to break upward or break downward. If you break downward, you got like one target at like 115 here. Now this is a 45% drop down,
Yeah.
and that would be, the XRP could drop down 45% and still theoretically outperform Bitcoin, because Bitcoin could drop down to like 40, 45K or something. And that would still be a better kind of performance there. So we got to look at that situation now. What a lot of people or XRP bulls would hope for is a break up. And I hope that we could break up to, kind of these areas right here. But when I look at kind of my EMAs here, like it is like your 4-day EMAs, see how they're turning gray right here? Last time they went from like gray to bright, it gets choppy because you were in such a choppy area, but we
Yeah.
got to be objective. Look at previous kind of bear markets. I mean, you were kind of bearish for a bit here. And if we just want to get a timeline on, when you could potentially bottom, I don't think it's going to go this low. Don't get scared. Don't worry. But, May, a lot of things point to May. So maybe a
Interesting.
dollar 15 in May, and that would be like your really good deal. And again, you could outperform Bitcoin during that area. And if we look at XRP versus Bitcoin, I drew this out. You're in a good kind of pattern here. Money flow coming up. Things look good on this evaluation right here for XRP versus Bitcoin. So I think over the next few years, potentially into the end of the decade, I think you may be able to make a rally upward, maybe 300% against Bitcoin. And I mean, I don't know. I would hope you can get back up to these all time highs against Bitcoin back in your 2017 bull run. That would be nice if you can do that. So I think the next 4 to 6 months, if you can kind of continue to outperform Bitcoin here, which it looks like you might, your money flow generally is not bad in a lot of these time frames. Your daily looks decent. So, as long as this can continue to outperform Bitcoin, I think we should be okay here. So yeah.
Some people are pointing to a new zone on this, and the idea is this is one of the traders out there that the cycle that was experienced with XRP between 14 and 17, almost identical copy of what we currently have, 21 to 25. So in both cases, what they were saying is the accumulation phase, which might have already occurred. The real question is are we in a new accumulation phase going into what could be next year? And especially, which is around that $2 mark, because that's a very
Mm.
pivotal reference point that a lot of people are looking at. Let's say that everything breaks and the Fed continues to cut, Bank of Japan continues to raise rates. and we start to see a raging bull market in 2026, would that flip your narrative on timing for all of these tokens? How would you play that?
So how I would, yes, and this depends how you define a raging bull market. Some people get
Well, I mean,
excited for.
Bitcoin hits a new all-time high of
Yeah, yeah.
126.
Well, I don't even think we need to go that high for to I my narrative would like there's a lot of people like the super cycle people, a lot of people are talking about Bitcoin at 200K, maybe even 300K by the end of
Well,
next
that's
year.
that's Tom Lee, that's
Yeah.
Bitwise, that's it's a
And
lot of the
listen,
people.
so the thing I don't have a problem with getting back. I'd rather get back into Bitcoin, let's say, because I took a lot of profits. I'd rather get back in at like 115 or even 120K on the way up to 200K, or even get back in at 4,000 ETH on the way up to potentially 6K or 8K.
Okay.
I think the risk is much, much, much lower if we break back above 4,000, if we break
Okay.
back above 120. The risk is much higher right now because our structure is still very weak. But I think if you
Yeah.
can break back up to 115, if you can break above 4,000 for Ethereum, your structure gets a lot stronger and the risk reward ratio gets much, much better in terms of the reward. And
Well,
you
there are
wouldn't miss
some.
out on too much. If we're going up to 8K or going up to 200K Bitcoin, you're not missing
Yeah,
out.
yeah, you're
Yeah,
soft in the market right now. I think a
yeah.
lot of people are in that position where they did take profits, with the exception of maybe some of the XRP holders who literally are still up 300-400% from this time last year. So they're in a good position right now around, if you think about just what this might mean in terms of how you play different strategies. But again, if you're betting against one or the other token, the big three, and we're gonna select three tokens for you today. We'll break down Solana. Obviously, we've done XRP, ETH. We'll also take a look at SWI for you guys to kind of figure out what would you play into in this next cycle that could get us into next areas of growth. One thing though that I will say is this news right here hit. To me, this may change the narrative on XRP again. And that, of course, has been built around what Trump's doing with this new preferred ETF selection. Did you see this?
I don't believe so.
So what he did was he came out and said, "Listen, we're gonna create a VIP list in a Trump linked ETF." Okay, and the concept was pretty straightforward. This would mean Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, Cardano, Chainlink, and Stellar. These are the
Mhm.
listings there, the weighted average there, XRP holding number 3 over Solana. And in reality, I think Trump is kind of interesting if you look at what we'll see from Hashdex at 6.4%. And you've got another thing, and that is Ripple possibly getting their banking license. So all this happening, that just seems like this is going to be one of those times where we might see another. Because remember, there was no reason really for XRP to take off like it did
Mm,
outside of Bitcoin was moving, and XRP absolutely went nuts after the
yeah.
case was done. But it didn't move immediately after the case, so that's one thing to compare. All right, Evan, let's get into our predictions on tokens. And the ones I want to look at is what are the best ones to buy in a pseudo bear market, if we in fact
Mhm.
are in one. And we've looked at XRP, we've looked at ETH. Let's take a look at Solana now and give me your opinion on where Solana is right now, because it's been taking a hit.
Yeah, oh yeah. So, yeah, let's take a look here. So, when we look at Solana, you just look at Solana itself, against the US dollar. And I mean, it's short term. You probably will get some more relief, but I do have concerns because look at your EMAs right here. They're going into the gray. Your
Yep.
EMAs, I mean, you kind of got away with it here. They went into gray. Now they're going into the gray again, and that could lead to a bit of an extended bear market. Now, I mean, the thing is, like, I think that Solana has the fundamentals. It has a lot of good things going for it. I don't think it's going to go down, anything too crazy, but I would really be looking at this area right around $80 as like a really, potentially really good deal for Solana if you can hit kind of that area. Probably, in the next few months, something of that nature.
Okay.
However, short term, let's get into our bullish case. It's not be too pessimistic. I would think that if you can get back above like that, you're probably going to get up to like 158 at least, maybe 160, kind of in the next month, maybe by the end of this month. If you can get there and then break above it, then you're at 190. Then you got more forward momentum, and you potentially could be running back to all time highs. But that's to be seen. We'll see
Yeah.
what happens here. I'm more, on the macro kind of for the next 4 to 6 months, bearish side potentially breaking
What
downward.
would be your entry for
Well,
Solana?
man, I go more on like time, but I would be looking at 80 to 100. That would be kind of
Okay.
the area there. I don't think you would lose 80. If we
Yeah.
look at Solana versus Bitcoin right now, this gives us a little bit more hope because I think that it may be able to outperform Bitcoin kind of on potentially the way down here, trying to hold this area. I think short term you may continue to kind of outperform Bitcoin. 2 week, this trigger wave is kind of forming, so I think that you probably would at least hold this area on Solana Bitcoin, even if you do break downward, maybe 20% down more. But I do think there's a lot of potential for Solana to continue to outperform Bitcoin here. And then, hopefully into the next few years with QE and all this, come back to your all-time high
No doubt. Yeah.
against Bitcoin by the end of the decade. So, yeah.
I'm still kind of curious as to how some of these alts are going to play out with QE aligning. Obviously, what we're going to see in lower interest rates with the Fed, because that's going to be something that really will be untouched by the midterms. He'll continue to cut and do the economic things that can apply to that. But the midterms are really a problem. And I think also we're really in a position right now that this market structure bill could hurt other altcoins. I would say the only two, possibly three that it doesn't is going to be Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP. Once you go outside of those three, Avalanche, SWI, Solana, this market structure bill is almost, it is a must have, for these tokens to really, I think, get next level institutional adoption, which is really where and what is happening with ETH, XRP, and Bitcoin is institutional adoption is going so strong. So Solana, we've charted. If you were to select between SWI and Avalanche to chart right now, which one would you choose?
Probably SWI right now because Avalanche has been just such a downer lately, and then SWI's been more
Had
kind
a
of
little bit of return. Yeah, it had a nice little run there. All
Yeah.
right, well, let's take a look at SWI Network because this is one that may end up being in the basket for next year. What do you think?
Let's take a look here. So if we look at, let's get our chart up. Let's look at SWI. So it's down quite a bit. I mean, this is somewhat of a significant point right here, like
Yeah.
$1.60. I mean, you got to be careful with this, down 70% right here. But I would say if you can get, I mean, you got the deep anchor waves right here. It doesn't look like a bottom yet. I'll be kind of, I mean, you could make an argument there's a bottom here. It's probably a local bottom. If I had to really guess here, probably something like this will happen. Then you'll come down to kind of these points, but it's kind of more of a time thing. Like,
Interesting.
May, June, July, those areas, new Fed comes in. But I think the thing too is look for the passage of the Clarity Act because that could be a real catalyst.
I totally agree. I think the Clarity Act is a boom for all of these RIM tokens out here that are potentially will have all sorts of new advantages with Clarity coming through. So interesting. All right. So you're low on SWI in the near term. Where would be your entry or your time? I know your time is probably in May or possibly just started. But what if Hassett is accelerating? Just the fear of Hassett is accelerating the Fed rate cuts.
So the slight fear with that is once it's like a 90% chance or 80% chance of something on Polymarket or Fed Watch Tool or whatever, it's already factored in. So my fear with that is people are going to get excited a little bit too early. And then,
do you think that's what happened with what's happened with Ethereum?
Kind of to a certain extent. Yeah, to a certain extent. So I think it could be a little bit extended, but I still think, it is a good place. It still would be a good place, anywhere from May, probably Q2, it's still kind of a good place. The thing I wanted to show you here is like, if you look at, you asked about Avalanche, the reason I'm a little bit more optimistic on SWE is I'm just been following the trend here. It's been outperforming Avalanche since the last 2 years. So
Yeah.
maybe that continues. It still looks like it's got potential to outperform Avalanche. That could change, but yeah. So I think that, to answer the question about, what price to look to get into SWE, I would say, dollar, kind of that area. And theoretically, I mean, 30% downward, my fear could be going down to 86 cents. It gets riskier. It's a $6
What
billion
would
market.
happen though if we see a mini bull run? Okay, I'll bring up the poly market real quick. I'll
Yeah.
take over the share. Because poly market has some very interesting odds right now. Okay,
Mhm.
here are the odds right now. I'm looking at, let's go to December, obviously just passed a quarter point, but January currently holding at, what is that? 74% on no change. Okay.
Yeah.
And on the quarter basis, it's at 24, dipping slightly. Then you go to March and you've got now a quarter basis point starting to dip down at about 37% and no
Yep.
change rising at around 50. Okay. Then all the way into April, and it's a grab bag, but it's
Mm,
around
still no
30% and 50.
change. Yeah.
Yeah. So these change so dramatically in a span of a week. But the fact that we've got a January still in play for a potential rate cut, because remember, this was the case 30 days ago when we saw the December rate cut. Let's go back into December. Remember, look at this craziness right here. Remember
Yeah.
right there, no change, 11%, and then it goes boom right there, and it changed and it took over. So
I
I
think
don't
this next
know.
time will be different though.
You do? Okay. Yeah, right.
Maybe. I mean, it's hard to say, man. I mean, I think, as long as you have, I mean, let's just look at the most responsible thing to probably do. As long as you
Yeah.
have 3% inflation, you probably shouldn't be cutting. You know what I mean? It probably should be a no
Well, as
change.
long as the labor market stays in check. That's
Yeah.
the key. If the labor market does
Yeah.
not stay in check, Powell is stuck, and
Yeah.
this is the problem that they're facing. And I think this was a statement that an analyst had the other day that I thought was really good, and that was that there's this rolling recession that has been occurring. Certain sectors have been getting hit. Right now, it's the restaurant industry. That's
Mm,
15 million people employed in the restaurant industry, just in the United States. They handle what right now is almost 1.2, 1.3 trillion in terms of revenue injection into the economy. So we're already seeing dramatic moves downward in that space. And that is one of the biggest employers out there outside of medical. If
mm.
that continues into Q1, that's a problem. It's a problem for the Fed, definitely, because that could barrel into next year if we don't get rate cuts, because these businesses are basically in a hard place to where they can go out and take loans because of the high rates right now. So
It
much less
definitely, yeah.
the problem. I know with all the car loans continue to rise, and then I just saw energy costs go up again. So gas prices just recently slid up again. So man, Trump's economy is in shambles
Well,
here.
I
Effort.
think too, you got silver going nuts right now. You
Yep.
got gold, dude. I don't know if Powell they're probably not going to cut unless they really have to. Because if you're the Fed, you look at what silver's doing. I don't
Yeah, and
know.
you got $4,200 gold.
Gold,
So
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I feel like it's just going to be a slow bleed down for those yields. Just a very slow. I think you need something violent to happen to really
yeah,
bring things down. Like you need worse than a slow gradual decline. Like you need a big drop down, and I don't think
yeah,
that's going to happen in 2026. I think it'll be more of a slow bleed.
yeah. Well, I think you're going to see a lot of people going toward stablecoin yields,
Yeah.
which I think is going to be absolutely huge in terms of opportunity. We've already started to see a lot of these staking positions right now with stablecoins, or I should say yield position with stablecoin ranging, even with RLUSD ranging upwards of 6%. I've seen some of these like USDC. I've been able to get almost 8% on
Mm,
certain strategies within DeFi, and in some cases even upwards of 10%. So
yeah.
You look at that where DeFi is going, and this is only going to get crazier if we actually do get a market structure bill in terms of what those opportunities are. So big stuff. The bankers were in DC this week, going at it,
Mm,
around don't let this happen kind of thing, or at least maybe they're trying to coordinate some sort of slowdown of this market structure because this would be a problem for them. Yeah.
makes sense.
Anything
Yeah.
that you're watching right now in the market that you're more concerned with?
Just when you look at like the thing that I would look at, and let me just show you here. Let's just look at Bitcoin a little bit.
Yep.
And I think that the thing here that you look at the 3-day for Bitcoin right here, and this is like the big, I mean, I just like if you're just looking at like the simplest thing,
Yep.
let's look at EMAs on your 3-day right here. See how these EMAs came into the gray right here, came into the gray
Exactly.
right here, good buy signal, came into the gray right here, great buy signal, and then came into the gray right here, great buy signal. But the problem is they came into the gray right here in January of
Yeah.
22, not so good of a buy signal. Now the
Yeah,
thing here,
exactly.
the patience that we can have, though, is wait till it turns bright, whenever that may be. And I would, estimate, let's just say, let's go most bullish case scenario. This thing's going to turn bright around 115. Like that's just, if you just map this out, they'll turn right around 115, 120. I would get back in at 115, 120 and try to ride this up to, 160, 150, at least right there, if that does happen. And I don't mind missing out on 10 or 20% or 30% there on the way up, because my confidence level would just be much higher if you can break back up to these
Mhm.
areas. And then if you break downward, you come down to these areas and then you finally come upward, towards the end of this year or something, you get the brights right there for these EMAs. That's a great place to get in. You probably, if you get up to 300-400K by the end of the decade, huge place to get in. And you could do the same thing with, altcoins on these EMAs, as well in the 3-day. So yeah.
Lots of stuff coming, guys. The yields are coming. I think we're going to see all sorts of new potentials here around this, and in some places pretty significant. If you're playing the DeFi markets, we'll probably do a full video on this, guys, out there. I know many of you liked the Hugo Flare Network interview, so thanks for that. Because I think a lot of people are looking at Kinetic. One of those is where you lend your basically your XRP as an F asset. And even in that scenario, it's still paying upwards of almost 5%. And if you get out into some of these more riskier versions, we're seeing anywhere between 12 to 18%. So
Wow.
pretty significant out there. And even Spark, I think SparkDex was doing an APR right now at like 30+%. Those I would not recommend, anything that's
Yeah.
getting upwards. That's a
That's,
little risky out there.
look at Paul, look at history. What was everybody getting into in the beginning
Yeah,
of
don't even say
2022?
the word.
I'm not gonna, yeah.
Don't even say the word.
Yeah.
But yeah,
There's
you're right.
similar yield. Yeah.
Yeah, had those kinds of yields.
Yeah.
So just don't get caught in these things because they can mess you up if you're not careful. And the other thing I think a lot of people are in right now is they're not really, even though, are you staking assets right now?
A little bit, man, but not too much. I'm not, I'm kind of invested more like an old person right now. I mean, I stake ETH. I mean, that kind of thing. I mean,
Yeah,
I have Berkshire Hathaway, I have S&P 500, I have gold, but I'm
gold.
planning on converting a lot of it to Bitcoin, to Ethereum, some XRP, things like that, kind
Yeah.
of later this year. So yeah.
Oh, late this year?
Yeah, later this year. Yeah. Or
In
next year,
December?
excuse me, next year. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
All
sorry.
right. Yeah. I'm feeling
Yeah.
2026
Yeah,
is
yeah,
is
later.
the year for this. All right,
Later, yeah.
Evan, thanks for coming in today. I appreciate it, man. It was good seeing you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Paul.
You bet. All right, you guys know what to do. Make sure and like and subscribe right here on the XRP podcast. We do more videos like this. If you like these kinds of breakdowns, let us know in the comments. We always love to kind of get your feedback. We'll catch you next time right here on the XRP pod. Take care.